Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. And as promised, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to DM NPCs and background characters that come from the core player races out of the Player's Handbook for 5th edition. In some ways, maybe this is like the long, slow send-off to 5th edition, because like at some point I'm gonna run out of things. I really feel like I have to talk about this game that's kind of dead since they've announced the next one. But I've run through halflings and elves, and I've run through humans and dwarves, so that takes care of the core races. So now we're gonna get into some of the more exotic and rare playable races out of this book. Half elves I kind of feel like covered pretty much in the video that talks about elves, since I kind of feel like half elves should be treated somewhat like tieflings, where they're not necessarily like the children of a human elf mating, but they're more the product of a human bloodline that has some elf ancestry at some point, back in time. And since the elves are fey and are, partially creatures of magic, the human genes have never like overridden the elf-like qualities, and the people descended from that moment of crossbreeding. And much the same way that tieflings are generations removed from whatever succubus or incubus mated with their mortal human ancestor. And if they were the direct child of both, they would be a cambion and not a tiefling. So obviously, though, like large segments of whatever magical essence of devil that is, still carried from child to child to child, overrides, a continued, genetic intrusion of human qualities, because they would still keep breeding back in with the human population. You also have a thing of over time. Both populations would balloon out a bit and could potentially start, breeding amongst each other after they're diversified and no longer quite as closely related to each other. And so you can kind of create a stable population of half-elves and tieflings living within your societies, and the same with half-orcs. In some ways, it might even be more advisable to not have half-orc characters be the direct offspring of a human and an orc, because I know where there's this effort to try to like rehabilitate orcs, and that like even before they've started excising stuff from books recently, there's already stuff in these books about how like romance may bloom between a human and an orc in the battlefield, and they will consensually make love and give birth to a half orc child, which I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say that to a lot of us, that just doesn't really seem to jibe well with fictional reality, let's say. But okay. So, but if you have like your half orcs in the settings, just be like a sub minority within the larger human population of people whose ancestor had an unfortunate encounter with an orc some generations ago. You get the away from like the direct thing about like your hero is the child of rape and all that kind of crap. It's buried further back. Also, like with the half elves and with the tieflings, over time, those half orcs, especially with the half orcs, because it's not like they're going to have as much of an easy time, breeding back into human bloodlines. They're more likely to focus kind of on each other and end up kind of creating a stable half orc population as if they were their own race. This can allow you to have something where if you're looking to have something akin to Lord of the Rings, where you have your regular orcs and then you have your Uruk-hai, well, the Uruk-hai are actually more, what half orcs are supposed to be anyway, because you go back to the novels, there's a lot of implications that the Uruk-hai were a mixture of hillmen and orcs. So that's how you get that out of the Matrix. Half orcs could like themselves also be interesting NPCs to be in control of orc armies and orc clans and all that kind of stuff, because even though the full-blooded orcs are way stronger and more ferocious and all that kind of good stuff, the half orcs are more intelligent, and between tactical advantages that gives you and just like the practical ability to deliver on promises and on agendas and impress the tribe into like, yeah, you know, you're stronger than him, but this guy like has successfully like won us all this treasure and captives and all this kind of stuff. So we're gonna go with his plan, you know, kind of a thing. It seems kind of natural that half orcs that go back to the wild, so to say, would, you know, often actually end up rising in the ranks amongst orcs, whereas amongst human society, you know, they're definitely going to be down there in the peasant classes, doing, you know, like the worst kind of jobs. I don't know. I overall, for a variety of reasons, yeah, I wouldn't like have them be as prevalent in the setting as half elves. I'd kind of keep them more on like tiefling population levels. And as for tieflings, they're descended from succubi or incubi who, or some other devil that, you know, had relationships with a mortal of some sort and had an offspring, and that offspring was raised in the mortal world, even if their mother was the devil. You know, that family didn't stay in hell. They didn't like have a house on Avernus and all that kind of stuff. That bloodline has remained on Earth and has continued to breed in with human bloodlines, so that you get your modern tieflings. Consider the kinds of people that devils would be looking to have that kind of relationship with. Pretty much all your tieflings are effectively going to be nobles, even if they're, you know, had been rejected from their noble title at some point, or their family has been rejected, so that you don't necessarily have to give the player character the background of noble. It should kind of just be, you know, writ as assumed that like all tieflings are descended from someone who was important in some capacity, because why else would they have been attractive to, you know, like these entities, you know, who, like, you know, they're trying to corrupt people and turn them into pawns and stuff, like, and having to sleep with them to like convince them to come over to your side is one thing, but actively wanting to like bear offspring, because, you know, like, I would like to think that there's not a whole lot of people out there like trying to like force themselves on devil succubi and all that kind of stuff. So you know, it's not like the devils weren't conscious of the fact that they're, you know, like creating life in these circumstances. But so yeah, it just that feels like that should, you know, kind of indicate that whoever it was that's the, you know, the founding mortal of this tiefling bloodline was probably someone important. And you know, also if this is all part of some sort of devil alliance, then they should have manifested some benefit from this. They got something out of it. You're gonna go to that level of creating like a D&D version of the Antichrist without showing some sort of profit. So it's very logical that, like, amongst the nobility of whatever your kingdom, human kingdom is, that if not all of them, if optionally, but at least there should be a slice and chunk of the upper class, aristocracy, noble lineages, you know, if not the ruler themselves, could potentially should be tieflings. Being a little mysterious about, you know, their origins specifically is also kind of good. They don't, you know, not knowing exactly what devil it was. Maybe they assumed that it was like an actual Lord of Hell, but it was actually just like some nobody imp that was shapeshifted. All that kind of stuff. There's different ways you can play with it. I also feel like there is kind of some debate, I feel, that should be had as to whether or not tieflings should be treated a bit more like a template, kind of a race, a sub-race kind of thing, like you get out of the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, where you have like the Dampiers and those weird hag half-breeds that weren't born that way. That's not an actual race. It's more like a template that you lay over an original starting race. And in some ways, like, tieflings should kind of be that, because unless they're saying that humans, elves, orcs, and devils are all the same species and thus able to interbreed with each other, there's some sort of magical kind of thing going on, in the same way that like a dragon that polymorphs and, you know, has a child with a mortal creature, you know, has birth to a half dragon as opposed to a dragon born. You know, so like, you know, there should be dwarf tieflings, there should be elf tieflings, there should be human tieflings, gnome tieflings. That I feel like there should be more variety that way about tieflings, and less so worrying about like the variety of like which level of hell does and that level of hell's overlord does your tiefling reflect, and you know, making like all the plain standardized basic starting tieflings, like they're all tieflings that are somehow tied to Asmodeus, that kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, just like, you know, they should be important people, even if they're no longer important people, if that makes sense as a statement. And your half orcs, I feel like, you know, like it's appropriate to include them as player characters, because there is a lot of potential tragic, dour, grim, thankless heroism to be mined out of playing half orc characters. If the setting is treating them properly, if they're too accepted and they're just like, oh, it's just a half orc buying an orange just like any other day, like, well, is everyone getting in a twist over? The fear and the distrust from humans and elves and the other prettier races in the setting creates the payoff of the fact that, you know, like this person, you know, has no, you know, like actual reason to be standing up for any of these people, but they're doing it anyway because it's the right thing to do. That's why I've always kind of said since 5th edition came out that if I was ever to actually like sit and play in someone else's D&D game, I would want to play a half-orc monk with the folk hero background. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to do there with that character concept, especially if you're playing a big, strong half-orc. That if you're playing a monk, right? Yeah, you know, they're impressive with all the fisticuffs and kicks and all and the whirly jumps and all that kind of stuff. But like the fun thing about them is you should play them as if they're trying as hard as they can to not ever have to do any of that stuff. You know, they're, you know, constantly just, I'm going to use my turn for total defense and evasion. And I'm going to like tell that my opponent is like, you don't want to do this, you don't want to do this. And then finally you get to that moment in the combat where like the chips seem to be down with everybody else, and then suddenly you're doing the flurry of blows and just like exploding kobolds all around you, all that kind of stuff. Coupled with a half orc who's like, you know, trying to like manage his inner instinctive rage and brutality and trying to be a civilized person, in spite of the fact that like everyone around him treats him like shit and makes him like, you know, live in pig sheds and stuff like that. And yet, like, you know, because of what he's actually doing on the ground of standing up for people, like he slowly starts to build a legend for himself for the folk hero thing. I think that's a great possible character concept, and all sorts of stuff can be done like that with half-orcs. They're actually one of my favorite races in 5th edition. Tieflings I've liked since Planescape, and they're in part why I think low-key 5th edition is actually the Planescape setting. But I guess that's a subject for another time. So there you go, Tieflings and half-orcs. I guess tomorrow, like Gnomes and Dragonborn, like deserve their own videos. So I guess it's a coin flip on Gnomes or Dragonborn, or perhaps you can let know in the comments below which of those two you might prefer to hear about first. At least for like what kind of ideas I have, largely mine from just what I normally do in my homebrew type settings. Or, you know, you can tell me like I have terrible ideas. Be sure to be insulting as much as possible. As you all know, if you've been regular followers here of the channel, I am desperate to be a victim, so be sure to victimize me all you want, baby. Anyway, stay waspinated.